Hey everyone, it's Carla from Carla's Cakes and welcome to Carla in the Kitchen. Today's all about French macaroons. They're a little bit tricky, but you guys have requested how do you make these macaroons? I've developed a foolproof recipe, and if you follow my tips, you should be able to get it right. Let's get started. So to start off with making a macaroon, it's a really tricky cookie to make, and it's a really finicky cookie. So there's a lot of important steps that you have to take when making a macaroon to make sure that you get it perfect. And I will be honest, it does take a couple of times. It took me a couple times to do it before I kind of got the hang of it. But I did come up with a foolproof recipe that if you follow these steps, you'll get it right. And there's two different types of macaroons. There's a coconut macaroon, which is made with coconut and condensed milk, and sometimes they'll drizzle chocolate on it. And then there's the French macaroon, which is the one that we're making. And I've had a lot of requests on how do I make a French macaroon. So this show is all about that, and I want to show you guys how I make it. So the first thing you're going to need to know is that when we're measuring out our ingredients, we want to measure it with a scale because it does have to be exactly right. You don't want to measure it with a measuring cup because sometimes you'll get too much or too little. And with a French macaroon, because it's such a tricky cookie to make, we do want to try and make it as perfect as possible. So to start off, I have 180 grams of icing sugar. I have 100 grams of almond flour, and what almond flour is just essentially just ground up almonds. You can ground it up yourself at home with a grinder. You just put in your almonds and grind it up, or you can actually buy this at your Whole Food sale restaurants or wherever. They'll have it for you. We also have 35 grams of sugar, and we have 100 grams of aged egg whites. And what aged egg whites means is that it's either egg whites that are at room temperature or egg whites that have been aged, so what I do is I'll take it out the night before and I will put a cloth on top and keep it in the fridge so that they age and they come to room temperature when I take it back out. And it's essential to have your egg whites at room temperature when you're whisking it, because we're gonna make a meringue with the egg whites and the sugar. And when we mix it, when you have the egg whites at room temperature, it's very important because it helps the meringue to form. So the first trick that I want you to know when making a French macaroon is that when we're mixing our icing sugar and our almond flour, we want to sift it. So sifting is actually just using a sifter, and we're going to put the two ingredients through the sifter, and we're going to make sure that there's no bumps and there's no extra, thick pieces of the almond or some shells or skin. So first I'll put in my icing sugar like so. And I'm just going to sift it through just to make sure I get rid of any bumps that may have formed. I did already sift it. I like to sift it twice just to make sure I didn't miss anything. And we're going to sift everything together. So first I sifted it so that I can measure out my 180 grams of sugar, of icing sugar. And then now I'm going to sift everything together with the almonds. So just through there. And I'll just squeeze it through. Make sure I get everything out. And now with my almonds, I'll just put it right through. And again, sift it through the sifter. And the little pieces that may stay at the surface of your sifter, you can throw that out. You don't have to worry about putting that into your recipe. Or you can leave it aside and use it as a snack because they're pretty yummy to eat. But don't use it for this recipe because those bumps that will come from the almond flour is actually, you don't want that because you want your macaroon to be nice and soft and have a perfect look to it. So by removing all the thick pieces from your almonds, then you're going to remove all those bumps that may come on top of your cookie. So just like this. So these extra pieces here I'm not going to use them. I could try and force them through the sifter, but they will create bumps on my cookie. So I'm just going to leave them aside, and I'll snack on them after. So this we can leave aside because we don't need it right now. Now the next step is we want to create our meringue. So the first thing I'm going to do on the second step is I'm going to add in my aged egg whites into my mixer. And it's about 100 grams of egg whites, which is about 3 large eggs. So I'll just turn on my mixer. I'm going to add my sugar after. First, I just want to create a foamy look to the eggs. So you can see that foam has appeared on top of the egg whites. So now I'm going to put it back on. I'm going to put it on slow, and I'm going to slowly add in my sugar. And then I'll just put it up a little faster. Now I'm going to bring it up a notch, and I want this to mix for about 3 to 5 minutes. I want to create soft peaks. So this is going to mix for a while. I'm going to check it to make sure that it doesn't get too hard. If it's too soft, the macaroon won't keep its form, but if it's too hard, it'll be too crunchy. So we have to find a perfect medium. So I'm going to mix it, and I want it to be soft peaks. So what that means is with my whisk, I'll check it. I'll stir it around and I lift it, and I'll show you. But the meringue should have kind of like a little hook to it. So that's what we're looking for. And once it has a hook, then we know it's perfect. If it's too straight, then it's too hard. So I'm going to turn this up a bit faster. Okay, so this looks good. See how it goes up and then it has just a little bit of a hook? So that's exactly what we're looking for. This is the perfect meringue right now for the macaroons. So I can take this right off of the mixer. So this is ready to be used for our macaroons. So I'll just stir this up a bit. So see how it goes up and it has a little hook? So that's perfect. So I don't need this anymore. Take that right off. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to add in our almond and sugar mixture right into our meringue, and we're going to fold it in. And the reason why we fold is because I've just created air. I've just incorporated air into my eggs, and if I keep mixing and I add that, I'm going to remove the air. So by using my spatula to fold in my mixture, I'm going to make sure to keep the air into my meringue. So I'm going to add this a little bit at a time. I'll add about 1/3 of the mixture, or about half, and I'm just going to fold it in. So I'm going to go around, here, move this, around and just pull in. And by folding, like I said, I'm not removing the air that has been incorporated into the meringue. I'll just add the rest. So this is probably the trickiest part about making a macaroon, is the folding. And I will be honest, this part did take me quite a few tries to get the hang of it, because you don't want to overmix and you don't want to undermix. If you overmix, then your macaroon will get too crunchy when you cook it. And if you undermix, then your macaroon will spread out and it won't create those feet. And the feet is actually something that marks the true macaroon. It's the little ridges or the feet around the bottom of the macaroon cookie that come out when you're cooking them. So if you see here, I have an example. So this area right here is the ridge or the feet, and that's what we're looking for. That is what really makes a perfect macaroon. So if we overmix or if we undermix, we won't get that. So it's very important. Once you get that, you know that you did a really good job. So I'm just mixing, and I just want to mix until it kind of looks like molten lava, or it has like a shiny look to it. So that's what I'm looking for right now. So I'll just keep folding it. So you can see here if I kind of drop it, it doesn't really look like lava yet. So I want to keep kind of twisting and turning, and I want it to be shiny. But once I have the molten lava look, that's when I'll stop. Because if I go too far, then it won't be what the consistency that I need it to be. It won't be the right texture. So let's check it now. So it's looking good. I'm just maybe a couple more stirs. So see how it looks like molten lava? And it has a shiny look to it? So that's what I'm looking for. That's when I know I gotta stop, because then I'll overmix. Now what I gotta do is I'm gonna transfer it into a piping bag. So I have a piping bag. You can get this at any store, and I'm using a round tip. This is so when I pipe my macaroons onto my parchment paper, it has a nice round tip and it's a perfect circular cookie. And to help me transfer my macaroon into my piping bag, I'm just gonna use a long cup and I'll just put it in. And this will just help it keep it in place. And I'll just dump it all in. There we go. Perfect. I don't need this anymore. So that's great. Just move this. And there we go. So now it's ready to be piped. So the next trick I want to tell you is to use parchment paper. And when we come back, I'll show you how to pipe this onto our parchment paper. So it's really important to use parchment paper when you're making a macaroon. You don't want to use any sprays or any fats because the fat will actually ruin your meringue. So you want to stay away from fat. Definitely use the parchment paper because it keeps the macaroon nice and clean. Another thing is you want to make sure that when you're making these macaroons that you only bake them one sheet at a time. Don't mix them in the oven. Don't put two at a time because you want to make sure that it has an even heat. You want to make sure, give it its time. These are a very, very finicky cookie. So you want to make sure you do everything perfect. So just put one in at a time and let it bake on its own. So we have our parchment paper. A trick to keep it down that I like to use is I'll just use my little bit of meringue that I have, my macaroon, and I'll just pipe a little dab on each corner. And this kind of just helps it keep in place, so that it doesn't move around while I'm piping. Just like that. And I'll just clean the edges here. Okay, so now what we gotta do is we gotta pipe the macaroon. So I wanna keep it tight and I wanna go in from the top and just kind of make a round circle and then twist out. And you wanna kind of get them all the same size. And you would just do the entire sheet. And don't worry about that, about this part, because we're gonna actually bang on the sheets after to remove any bubbles, so that will flatten out. So making sure that we're keeping them about the same size helps for an even bake when we cook them. Almost done. Macaroons are beautiful too because you can add any color to them and make them pink, blue, any color. If you're doing a dessert table or something, or if you have a theme that you're going with, then you can follow that theme and create different colored macaroons. So the next trick that I would offer is, so now that I've piped it on, I want to actually, like I mentioned before, I want to just bang on the table a little bit with the sheet because it's going to release any air bubbles that are in the macaroon that would actually crack while baking if we don't bang them out. So it's a bit loud, but what I'll do is you kind of just, I'll tap 4 times all the way around. So I'll go just like that. And you can actually see how some of these bubbles kind of came to the surface. So I want to keep doing that until they all pop. Just like that. So that looks good. So the next trick is you want to keep these before baking for about 20 to 30 minutes outside because you want to create a shell. So while these macaroons sit outside, they kind of harden from the top. And if you ever had a macaroon before, they're very famous for having kind of like that hard shell on the top when you bite through it, and then in the center it's kind of like a mushy or chewy center. So this is essential for that. Also, by creating the shell by leaving it out for 20 to 30 minutes, this is also crucial for creating those feet because the feet is actually created when the heat of the macaroon is trying to escape. When we create the shell, the heat can't go upwards, so it goes outwards, and then that's what creates the feet around the macaroon. So we have to create that shell if we want to create that perfect looking macaroon. So we're going to keep these out for 20 minutes. Also, while we're waiting, you can preheat your oven to 300 degrees. And I did already prepare some macaroons, so I'll just show you what the finished product looks like. I can keep this aside for now. So these are the finished product. So this is what a macaroon looks like. So you can see it's a nice shell. We have the feet around the edges here, or the ridges, and they're hard on the outside, but if I squish through it, it kind of has like a chewy or a soft center. I don't know if you can tell, but it is kind of like chewy and sticky on the inside, and that's the look of a perfect macaroon, and that's when you know that you've created the right macaroon. So this is great. I hope that these tips helped you. Now the next step is we want to create our fillings for these macaroons. And I don't know if you guys know this, but when you make a macaroon and you fill them, it's actually better to have a macaroon 24 hours after making them because the flavor doesn't come from the shell, it comes from the filling. So when you bite into that macaroon, it's almost like it's an infused flavor. So the filling that you put into your macaroon actually gets infused into the cookie by letting it sit for 24 hours, and that's where you get your flavor. So when we come back, I'll show you how to do that. So now it's time to fill our macaroons with delicious filling. The options are endless with what you can fill your macaroons with, but today I want to do chocolate. I love chocolate. So I did create a ganache. It's a nice thick ganache, and I'll tell you how to make it. And I'm going to be using Nutella as well to fill the macaroons. And as I mentioned earlier, the flavoring actually does come from the filling. So a macaroon shell doesn't actually have any flavor. The flavor does come from the filling. And when we put the filling into our macaroons and we sandwich them, the best thing to do is to keep these in the fridge for about 24 hours before you take your first bite, because that will give it enough time for the flavor to be infused into the shells. Also, I will mention when you take it out of the fridge, keep it out for about 15 to 20 minutes so that it can come to room temperature before you eat it, so it's not a crunchy shell. You'll get that chewy texture. Okay, so to make my ganache, I did a 1-to-1 ratio. So I did 1 cup of chocolate chips and 1 cup of heavy cream. And I did bring the heavy cream to a light simmer, poured it over my chocolate chips, let that sit for 1 minute before I continued to stir. And then I let that sit in the fridge so that it could come together. So it's a nice thick ganache. So it's perfect for filling because it won't be too spready and it won't drip over the sides of the cookie. So now that we have that, the Nutella is just straight Nutella. I grabbed it from the jar and I put it in here. I have 2 piping bags and I want to show you 2 different techniques. I have a round tip and I also have a star tip. This is the 1M tip. So I want to use both. You won't really see the design, but I just wanted to show you how it looks from the outside of the macaroon once we sandwich it. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in my ganache and my Nutella into my piping bags. And I like to use a nice long cup for this. It kind of helps me keep the bags in place. So we'll just open this up. I'm going to place this into my cup. Kind of the same thing that we did earlier with the macaroon batter when we put it in here. I'm doing the same thing. So same with the other side. And we'll fill them up. So here's my ganache. You'll see how it's like a nice thick texture. That's perfect. Right in. The first time I ever saw a macaroon was actually in France. I went to see my friend because she was working closer to the south kind of east of France, or probably more central France. It was in a place called Gex. So I went to Paris and then I had to take a train down to meet her, but I was in Paris for about 7 hours, so I was walking around by myself and kind of enjoying it. Back then, I had printed out all the directions with, I think it was like Google Maps, so I had a paper, and I was just walking around the city, tracking down my steps, how to get to all the different places. I got lost a couple times, but that's okay. Here goes the Nutella. And I was walking, I remember walking by this cafe, and everyone was sitting outside, drinking their coffees, and I noticed that everyone in their plates had these like really cute, colorful cookies. And that was the first time I had ever even seen a macaroon. I didn't even know what they were when I had seen it then. So I went and I was like, what is that? It's so cute. And they said, oh, they're the French macaroons and everything. Well, they didn't call them French. They said they're macaroons. And so then I tried some and they were just so delicious and so cute. And I thought that they would probably be impossible to make. I ended up buying a pre-made mix from France. It's like a box, like how you can get your cake box mix. I bought a macaroon mix to try it at home. And I tried making it. It wasn't really that good. And then I just started researching until finally I found the perfect recipe. I kind of tweaked it myself to make the perfect recipe. And I just always fell in love. So every time I have a macaroon, it kind of brings me back to when I was in France, lost in Paris, right? When I was walking around and kind of making my way through. So yeah, I love macaroons, and I'm sure you will too. So here's the ganache. I don't want to forget. So I have the ganache on the round tip, and I put my Nutella on the star tip. So this is good. And I can move these out of the way. I just have these plates so we can place the macaroons onto the plates. So I have these. They've already been cooled for about 20 minutes. I don't want them to be hot because it'll make the ganache or the Nutella melt. And I made some pink ones for this because pink and brown is such a cute color. One nice mixture for this is doing a chocolate ganache and adding raspberry to it. So you kind of have like a chocolate raspberry filling. It's delicious. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'll do the same thing over here. So it's pretty simple. So we're just going to pipe only one side and then we're going to sandwich with the other. So with the Nutella, I'm just going to put it right in the center, apply pressure, and release. So you see that star tip? See how it creates kind of like a little star? And then when we put the shell on top, you'll kind of see the little ridges around, and it's really pretty. So that's what the star tip would look like. And then, actually, let's put the ganache, and I'll show you the difference. We'll put the shells on top. And with the ganache, same kind of idea. I'm just putting and releasing. I don't want to put too much, so I want to keep a little room around the edge. I don't want to fill it completely with the ganache because when I put the shell on top, it will help it spread more and it'll complete the rest of the space. If I go all the way to the edge now, when I put my shell, it's going to droop over the sides and we don't want that. So right in the center it goes, just like this. And now it's time to put our shells on top. Look at that. So perfect. You can even use vanilla buttercream if you want, or you can put caramel, you can put cookie butter. Peanut butter is really good as well. And like I said, make sure to eat this 24 hours after making them so that it does give it time to infuse into the cookie. So you can see the difference here. So see with the round tip, it makes a perfectly round circle. And this is kind of the more typical look of a macaroon, where it's a round cookie with the round filling. And then here you can see with the Nutella, right over here, you can see how it kind of, you can see the edges coming out. So it gives it a little bit of a design. So it's up to you, whichever way you want to do it, whichever way you prefer. You can use your star tip or you can use your round tip. Just make sure that you have fun while you're making this, and make sure that don't get discouraged. Keep practicing, because practice makes perfect. And trust me, when you get these right, it's really worth it. Thank you so much for watching. Can't wait to see you next time, and enjoy eating your macaroons.